It's a great pleasure to have with us again Intelligencia, a company that I have said several times I've been following with great pleasure from the beginning, and I'm really glad to see the achievements that the company has had, and really looking forward, Dimitri, to and your colleagues to hear the news and hear what the future has for you. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Giorgio. It's a pleasure, it's an honor for us. I must say at this point that we connected a few years back, almost 4 years back, when we were tiny. And that's only because you and Demokritos have such a strong passion on science and on advancing science. It's an honor also because Demokritos is such a reputable institution. It's an honor also because we're doing things in a similar space and some overlap. So you appreciate the complexity of the challenge at hand. We'll do the following. We'll walk you through the why. Every problem has a why. So I'll start. I'll kick off the discussion on the Intelligencia side. We'll discuss the why behind what we do. We'll discuss where we stand as a company and the foundations of our technology and platform. And then I'll turn over to Gerry, who heads our data science team, and he will discuss an overview of what we do and how we do things with regard to data science, machine learning. And then we'll hand over to Violetta, who leads our product efforts. And she will discuss, beyond the data science, what it takes to eventually be a technology company and support users and bring our technology to the world. In a private setting and not academia. So with that, maybe let's switch to the next slide. I'm the co-founder and executive director to Intelligencia. We started 4.5 years back, and we started with a mission. We started with a purpose. It's the following: if you look at drug development over the last decades, it has been life-saving. It has helped people eventually live longer. It has helped people live better. And that's a huge impact to all of us. At the same time, there is a bitter truth behind drug development, which is that the success rate is relatively low. For people who have worked in discovery, you're probably very aware that it's very much a trial and error, and so success rate is by definition very low. But success rates are relatively low also in drug development, where we are focused. What is drug development? Is the stage where a drug has to be used in humans, patients or healthy individuals, depending on the indication. So that stage, which is called drug development or clinical development, it has typically 3 phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And drugs are tested for safety and tested also for their efficacy. And historically, what we have seen is that for any given drug, for any given program that enters drug development, it takes long. It takes on average 10 years to eventually get to the patients, get through the regulatory bodies in the respective countries. It costs a lot. Typically, it costs the actual cost in the hundreds of millions. Some people estimate in the billions, taking into account also opportunity costs or taking into account the whole spend in the space. So they will spend money and resources across, let's say, 10 drugs for this single drug that will eventually get regulatory approval. And the chances are that those drugs will never see the light of the day, will never reach the patients. Now, how the industry operates. we're talking about precision medicine. We're talking about some super fascinating mechanism of actions, novel modalities, platforms, and so on and so forth. The reality is that our space, biology, the pharma, the biotech space, they're super advanced. You think about the science that goes into it, it's super advanced. If we take the example of oncology, you know, the last 10 years, 15 years has been a continuous breakthrough. At the same time, when it comes to decision making, when it comes to things like how I advance a molecule and a program to clinical development, how I advance from one phase to the other, how I allocate resources to this, which indications and so on and so forth to choose and so on and so forth, then the science kind of goes away, which is counterintuitive, but that's the elephant in the room. And that's why the risk is, or the probability of success is relatively low. And that's why the return on investment in the space has been declining over the years, constantly. Now, the way the industry works, so that we set the context, is the following. People rely on historic benchmarks of questionable quality. So they say, okay, what has succeeded in NSC, in non-small cell lung cancer over the last 10 years? What has failed? This is the ratio. So that's our baseline for assessing risk. They rely on key opinion leaders, KOLs. They interview people, they collate the opinions, and they try to come up with something quantifiable. And if they're Pfizer, if they're Johnson & Johnson, and so on and so forth, then they have the luxury of data. They have fantastic internal data. They have the luxury of data science teams. So they do some really interesting applications, but one, they have a tunnel vision because they rely typically on their internal data. They don't have the luxury now on having an eagle-size view, if you will. And they don't have consistency. There are multiple teams internally, so typically there is no consistency. And that's when, if you're a biotech, on the other hand, you don't have any of those, right? You rely again on historic benchmarks and God help us quite often. So that's where Intelligencia comes in. The idea is, can we help better understand the risk in the space? Can we use data science, machine learning, AI, to better assess the probability of success? So we started 4.5 years back. We're a New York-based company. We started out of New York. All of our customers are in the US. And at the same time, we made the conscious decision to build most of our product team in Greece, tapping into the talent here, and also investing into retention in Greece, because in the US, people, you know, are a bit volatile, I would say. But in Greece, once you provide proper environment, once you have something innovative that is addressing a global market, as we do, and people will tend to stay. So who we are, we're a company of about 85 people now, interdisciplinary. What that means, in our case, is we bring together people with biology background, pharmacology background, data science, software engineering, bioinformatics, product management. And then that's one pillar. Let's call it product for simplicity. Along with commercial, customer success, sales, marketing. It's another pillar, along with the backbone of the company. What takes a company to operate is policies and incentives and process and so on and so forth. Let's call it people ops, let's call it finance, so on and so forth. But that's also super crucial for a technology scale up, for technology startup. That's super crucial because typically those companies suffer from lack of process. And as you grow faster and faster and faster, you know, you need a framework to operate. Otherwise, you may have the best intentions, but the experience will not be optimal. And all startups are a shiny place from the outside, but from within, it's a hard place to operate. So we have made a very conscious and major investment. We keep making major investment in this backbone, in our culture, in our process, in how we operate, how we grow as a team, how we grow as individuals. Now, again, the core of the company is assessing probability of success, but the umbrella, the vision and mission, if you will, is how we help accelerate drug development. That's the vision, and bring drugs faster to the patients. We do this as a company through risk, and the core is assessing risk. The core is assessing probability of technical and regulatory success. That's where we're strongest. At the same time, we have been expanding, and we're getting questions, and we try to address questions that are more downstream and sometimes more upstream. A good example of more downstream question is, okay, how can I improve now probability of success for a given therapy? Let's be on the same page. Just by understanding something, often it is the solution in many things. If we're working with R&D portfolio strategy teams, as we do, already the probability of success is the solution, because we bring everyone on the same page. We're creating this much needed consistency and provide a better, more accurate risk assessment so that people can make decisions on what programs to advance, what programs to potentially hold. If we're working with business development, in licensing, out licensing, that's already the solution, because we help people identify, search for novel assets and assess them in a fast and efficient way. If you're working now with program level people, with the people who drive the involvements of the world, these people are less interested about what is the probability of success. They're more interested about how can I improve the probability of success, not at the portfolio level, but at the program level. So where we help them is make decisions on endpoints, on how to power the study, how many patients to enroll, and so on and so forth. We help them with sensitivity analysis, with scenario building, and we'll cover a bit of this too. Last thing on Intelligencia, again, we're a relatively small company. We have been growing. Our goal is to be kind of the lighthouse out there when it comes to risk assessment. And by doing that, we can create huge efficiencies in the space. We can really help accelerate drug development. And we can make the lives of not only of patients better, but also of the users, of the scientists who are dedicating their lives into bringing innovation to the patients. And with that, I think we can be a major technology company. At our stage of development, we're a Series A company. We've raised about 15-20 million in funding, and we have. We're working with some major companies out there. We have our own revenue stream. That said, at our stage of development, there's a 30% chance historically, since we're talking about probability of success and likelihood of success, there's a 30% chance that companies go bust. So let's keep that in mind, not just for Intelligencia, but for any technology, for any scale-up company. And a major ask and task for the company is how to mitigate those risks. Last thing, and I will turn to Gerry. As you think conceptually about Intelligencia, but also many companies in the AI space out there, there are three major pillars. There's data. Everything starts and ends with data. You cannot talk data science without data. Garbage in, garbage out. So we have invested a lot into creating some really high quality data. That's our hidden strength, if you will. Mostly tapping into data that are available in the public domain, but creating ontologies, creating dictionaries, harmonized dictionaries that help us bring this data together, creating software engineering data pipelines to bring data together, having a huge infrastructure internally to tabularize data, having a very strong team of biologists, pharmacologists to curate those data, and having multiple layers of QC. And then we tap also into data that are not publicly available, and we augment our database. And data science, Gerry will discuss much more on this. And then product, again, product can encompass everything that I've been discussing about, but let's think about delivery methods. The way we work with most of our users is through a software. In a way, we package everything, all the insights that we generate into a software platform, and that's what we provide to the user, so that we're building a muscle. It's a capability that stays with our users. It's not ad hoc advice. And most of the technology companies, or many of the technology companies, work in a similar way. With that, Gerry, again, the core of the company is data science. So on to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. So I'll be talking a little bit about the data science work that we do at Intelligencia. So as it was mentioned, data science lies at the core of the company and at the core of the services and the solutions that we offer to our users. So what we try to do in Intelligencia, first is it all starts with data. When we talk about data science, if there's no data and if there's no good quality of data, then there cannot be any meaningful results and outcomes out of this. So we really strive to get the best data that we can out there with regards to the clinical trial space. So we use our own expertly curated data along with various other sources from public domain and third-party data. And we have, let's say, what we call an enlarged data set that we really strive to keep in a very high quality, because this will power all our machine learning algorithms and all the outputs that we offer to our users. So we have three main machine learning solutions that we offer to the clients via our platform. So basically, first and foremost, we have the PTRS, which is basically assessing the probability that a clinical trial pipeline will eventually end up to get FDA approval and will be given as a therapy to patients that are at need. Then we also have the clinical trial design solution, where we try via simulations by actually designing and formulating the whole data generation process to run simulations and scenarios so that we can help our users make the optimal decisions when it comes to the clinical trial design space. And last but not least, we also have what we call the breakthrough science, which is an NLP solution that goes through various journals and publication regarding medical subject. And we try to identify over there trends and areas of scientific innovation that we believe could benefit our users, and our users meaning the big pharmaceuticals and the biotechs of the world. And so let's get into the first one. So regarding the PTRS, so our approach is a machine learning approach to derive and come and calculate a probability that a specific pipeline will end up getting approval. For us, we treat it as a supervised machine learning model, where basically we try to collect data historically across the various clinical trial pipelines that we have observed in the past and that we know the outcome of, meaning that they ended up being successful or unsuccessful. And there's a lot actually of both data curation and data engineering and data transformation to come up with clean and reliable data that are also unbiased, so that we can use those and train our supervised machine learning algorithms and provide probabilities that are also unbiased and can basically generalize well and be applied to ongoing programs, where that's where most of the value lies, to help our users assess current ongoing programs with regards to how successful this could be in getting FDA approval. So what we present over here is an example of a supervised machine learning algorithm. It's the random forest, which has gotten a lot of attention throughout the years. So that's one of the supervised machine learning algorithms that we're looking at. And the way that the random forest works is by creating multiple decision trees and taking a look at the features that we feed the model with, and tries to create as much independent decision trees as it can, so that it then at the end takes the average voting, let's say, of its decision tree, of basically where each decision tree is predicting whether our pipeline would be successful or unsuccessful. And through this majority voting, we try to reduce the bias and the overfit of our model. Now, another good thing about each actually decision tree is that we can really get into it and investigate how it makes the decisions. So it's actually what we call also like an explainable model, each decision tree, and that it compares to deep neural networks where there's no explainability behind it and there's no logic, let's say, to follow. So that's one of the core algorithms that we use in Intelligencia with regards to the PTRS solution. And over here, we present some results, because every model has to come up with an evaluation criteria to actually judge whether that model works or not. So what we did over here is that we assign PTRS to historic programs, basically to programs that we know the outcome of, whether they were successful or unsuccessful. Obviously, these probabilities were given in the test set or outer set, if you like to say so. So there's no, let's say, data leakage on the training set. And we rank those programs by descending probability and color code them with regards to whether they were successful or not. So overall, the perfect model would have all the green, meaning the approved programs, on the very left, so having a high PTRS assigned, and all the non-approved programs on the right side of the curve, meaning that the unsuccessful programs would receive a low PTRS. Intuitively, that's how we can basically judge whether our algorithm works or not. So if we can assign high probabilities to programs that ended up being successful and low to the ones being not successful, then we have something that's actually very valuable. And that's a plot that we see over here for a specific stage in the pipeline, where we judge each pipeline with regards to whether they will end up being successful or not. So overall, we can predict successfully at the beginning of the phase 2, where most of the R&D has actually not been let's say, budgeted across the different programs. And we said that we can predict around 73% of the programs that will end up being successful, and around 78% of the programs that will actually turn out to be unsuccessful. And basically, our offering is that we believe that this can be a very useful input to the people that take decisions on the pharmaceuticals of which pipelines they should prioritize and which ones they should not. Now, on the previous slide, we show how the performance looked like on actually historical data. We also run the exercise once we have a trained algorithm and the algorithm is out there and judging continuously the ongoing programs. We take different steps as we go and look at the performance of it on actually ongoing trials for the past quarter, for every quarter actually, and judged the ongoing trials that ended up being successful or unsuccessful. So there, in that sense, we can judge also our algorithm in a completely unbiased way, because when it was trained, these programs were ongoing, and we only learned later whether they got approved or not. And over here, we have a snapshot of how that performance looked like on the first quarter of 2020, on the last quarter of 2021, where again, we see actually we had 8 programs that moved from unknown phase, unknown status, meaning ongoing, to approved or not approved. And we see how much higher we judge all the programs that ended up being successful versus the ones that ended up being not successful. So high probability accompanied with approval means that our algorithm is predictive, and accordingly low probability with approval, meaning with approval being failure, also signifies that our algorithms work. Now, another very hot topic in machine learning has to do with explainability. So our users don't just want to see a probability assigned next to a program, but want to understand what's driving that probability behind it. So that's where we're offering solutions by the SHAP values to help our users understand how we end up giving those probabilities to the different programs. So SHAP values is a state-of-the-art technique where via game theoretical approach, we try to assign probabilities to a specific observation, to a specific program in our case, throughout the different features. So how did the probability of that specific program came to be? Because of the features that we use and because of the specific feature values that this program has at the moment in time that it was predicted. So SHAP values give us a very good insight of how we can assign, of how and why we assign that kind of probability to that program. Now, another solution that we offer at Intelligencia has to do with the clinical trial design, as it was mentioned, where over here we try another machine learning approach. So we don't use, let's say, supervised machine learning algorithm, but we try to model the whole data generation process. So what we do is we try to model how a clinical trial actually evolves and generates data, and how by changing different inputs, we can observe different outcomes from the trial. For the ones familiar, actually what we construct is a Bayesian network where there are clear interdependencies between the different variables, and also there are latent variables into the model, whereby by changing some variables, we can observe how the outcomes of the trial, when that comes to realization, can change. So this is basically also what we call a simulation engine. And we can try different scenarios and observe different outcomes. By using this simulation engine, where it has a very strong theoretical approach, because we formulate the whole data generation process, and it's very also understandable to our users. Our users can then take optimal decisions with regards to, example, how many patients should they enroll at the phase 3 or the phase 2 trial. And that has to do, basically helps our users prove that, let's say, a good and effective drug can also prove statistically its efficacy by having the right number of patients, and by helping enroll the right number of patients, we can help those pipelines and therefore those drugs to come out to the market sooner and in a more efficient way. Now, the results of this simulation look like in the following slide, where we basically have priors for our latent variables, and we run simulations and observe how this simulation could look like if they're realized. So by actually tracking a simulation throughout the various stages of the clinical trial, from earlier phase to phase 3 and to observing the results at phase 3, we can see the percentage of the simulations that will get approval, while also the percentage of the simulations that will fail. And also what's super interesting is that we can also inform our users that by observing some efficacy metrics at an earlier phase, how should they judge these metrics that they observe, whether they should, and understand their risk, whether they should proceed at a following phase up 3 phase, and with how many patients they should go given the observed outcomes at the earlier phase. Again, here our user has the possibility to change some key variables and take the optimal decision. For example, at which criteria, which should be the threshold of the outcomes observed at phase 2, that it should then choose to proceed with a phase 3 versus that it should stop that specific pipeline and focus on another pipeline. So this is the core of the data science that we do at Intelligencia, and I'll now pass the torch to Violetta to guide you through our actual offering and the product that users see and interact with. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gerry. Hi, everyone. I'm Violetta. I'm the Chief Product Officer of Intelligencia. And what I would like to show you, as Gerry said, is how we take all this work of our data science team, our scientific associate team, and we turn it into a product for our users. So I hope that you can all see my screen. This is our platform, and as you can see here, we have 2 modules in the platform: the portfolio optimizer, what we call portfolio optimizer, and breakthrough science. I'm going to focus today on the first part, and I'm going to start by explaining why we call it portfolio optimizer. So in the pharma industry, every big pharma company has a portfolio of drugs that they test against indications. So as Gerry and Dimitris said before, when I want to test a drug against an indication, let's say breast cancer, I will set up trials, right? First, the phase 1 trial, which checks for toxicity and safety, then the phase 2 trial that it checks for efficacy, then phase 3 trial, and then if all the trials or all the different steps that are taken are successful, then FDA gives an approval. Not all cases have the same trials and all the same steps, but think about it like that for simplicity: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Now, in each important step of the way to FDA approval, the portfolio strategy teams come together to make a decision whether they should continue investing. Why is that? Because as we saw, it takes a lot of money and a lot of time to go through these trials and at the end get an approval. So these decision points are very important. So what our modular platform is trying to do is to help people in the pharma industry make better decisions. So maybe continue investing in a drug that is very promising, or stop investment and start another new investment on something better. So this is what you see here. You see an overview of what is happening right now on clinical development. As you can see, we're supporting oncology and parts of CNS and I&I. So if a user wants to see exactly what's happening, let's say today on breast cancer, right, they can choose here and they can see all the drugs that they are tested on, for breast cancer and the different sub diseases of breast cancer and at which phase this is. And of course, you can see here on the right what Gerry explained before. So all the work we do in order to give a probability of success in this, what we call pipelines. So a user can come here and can see not only their own portfolio of pipelines, but also of the competitor. And this is also key, because what we see in the pharma industry, is that a lot of innovation comes from agreements that big companies do with smaller companies, right? With biotechs or acquisitions. So all this is very, very important for that reason. But as usual, and this is something it's common across industries, when we provide the machine learning prediction to the users, the first question they make is, okay, but why? Why the probability of success for this pipeline, for this drug, is 70%? So in order to answer that, what we do is that we offer a lot of information to put this number into context. So you can see here on the right, a chart that says that comparing this pipeline, so this drug against this disease, versus other pipelines that they are similar, so they are all phase 3, they are all targeting the same disease, we see that your program has very high probability of success. It's in the 4th quartile, so it's very good. So one thing we do in order to answer this question is we give context. The second thing we do, and this is the feature we are implementing now, we are launching it soon, is what Gerry showed us, SHAP values. So SHAP values are putting a light on machine learning and shows what is behind it. And what you can see here is the model that Gerry's team created, productionized in the platform. And we have added a lot of things here, like below, the user can see all the features that we take into account when we look into making a prediction, not only the ones that they are very predictive, but everything, in order to create peace of mind to our users that we don't see only these features that they are very important at the end, but we also have looked into another 100 features that, they might have not been predictive. But that's important for the user to know it, so that they have peace of mind that we have all the data needed to create the best prediction out there. The final thing I want to show you is data. So we put a light on machine learning. We also set the prediction, some context for the prediction, and we also give data, raw data that power our predictions. And this is also very important for the user to feel that Intelligencia has all the data needed, and maybe data that I don't even know about, that they exist, so they can again trust what we do, and then they can take these predictions and they can start advocating for them inside the company, right? Because if you want to advocate that we should continue the investment for this drug in this indication, you need to have arguments, you need to have data. And this is all the things we do with the platform to enable our users to have these discussions. So that's one part of the platform. We also do a lot more, because in this journey of creating the right data to power our data science team, we have created a kind of a treasure, a data lake, a data warehouse that has lots and lots of insights. So we also provide to our users insights and historic benchmarks and things that we know that they value a lot. And we plan to do much more of that in the future. And we also keep building new modules. So apart from Portfolio Optimizer, we're also building more things to enrich our portfolio and use cases that we serve. Now, what I want to talk about a bit more is what does it take, right? What does it take to go from machine learning and from data science and from what Gerry showed us to what I showed you, the platform. As I said, it's not enough to have the prediction. You also have to explain the why the prediction is the way it is. And then the next question that always comes is, okay, but what can I do about it, right? You tell me that the probability of success of my drug is not great, and I would like to increase it. Can I do something about it? And this is what Gerry showed us before with the sensitivity analysis, the Bayesian modeling. And this is our next step on productionization. So in the next few quarters, we're going to add that in the platform as well. So what do we need to add it? There are a few challenges that we need to address, apart from actually having the models that Gerry has already and the team have already created. First, we need to make sure that all our models can support all use cases. So when we put something in the platform, and because the platform is self-serving, our users need to be able to choose any case they want, right? For any indication we support, our models need to work, and they need to work fast. We cannot have a model that takes a lot of time, because then the user bounces. Bibliography says that you need to have the result in 1 to 2 seconds. Otherwise, you need to start creating loading states and waiting signals in order to keep the user in the platform. And if the time goes more than 10 seconds, good luck. It's very hard for the user to stay. The other important challenge is user friendliness. We showed you lots of data and lots of machine learning data science concepts, which very often our users don't know about. What they care about is the result of what we do. So we need to present all these concepts in a user-friendly way. And this is another science and art, which is the UX of all this, right? How do you present to the user? And we need to do all this in a maintainable way. When we first started, we used to do lots of hacks so that we run fast. But hacks tend to break in the future. So it's really, really important. We have gone back and we have fixed many of these. And as we build and more features and more modules, this is even more crucial, because you need to make sure that the platform remains stable and it's trustworthy and there are no errors and the users can trust it while you're off building new stuff, new interesting stuff. And finally, the last challenge is keep being best in class. It's not enough to have once, great predictions. Data changes, the world changes. Of course, competition comes into play, and we need to keep being the best. So we have employed a loop where our data science team updates the algorithms every quarter. So inside this quarter, they test new features. We have a loop where our biologists and the product team and the data science team, they look into results and they come up with ideas. So we keep testing new features, and that manifests in a new algorithm every quarter where we update the results and we see better and better predictions. That's the part of productionization. And of course, what does it take, right, to solve these challenges? Key is different skills. We have, our team has many different skills. We have our engineers that have the data, that build the automatic pipelines that bring the data, our biologists, scientific associates who are curating this data when it's needed. Of course, all this fits in our data science team to create the algos. Again, our engineering team takes the results and creates the platform we saw. Our designers, the artists are the ones that are creating the experience. And finally, the product managers, that they're responsible to basically all of us to be behind one goal, to have very clear vision of what we're building and making sure that nothing falls below the cracks, right? That all these teams work together, know where we're going towards, and the whole work is smooth. So have all these different skills and we work all together. And the key to make it happen is collaboration. I've been in a few technology companies, and one thing I know is collaboration is key, because we solve very, very difficult problems. And a team that collaborates well is a team that can solve any challenge that come into way. And that's one thing that we're very proud in Intelligencia. We have a product development team that is all or 99% in Athens. And we have a very, very good team that works across all these areas and all the skills and works very, very well. And finally, very, very important for productionization is the right infrastructure. Again, we're building more and more of that. For all these teams to work together, they need to have contracts, they need to have processes. We need to have a very good testing infrastructure to make sure that there are no problems. For example, when data moves from the data science database to the production database, etc., we need to make sure that there are no issues. And if there are issues, we have notifications, we act fast. So that's in a nutshell the challenges of productionizing and what is needed to make sure that we overcome them. And I think I'm going to open it up to questions, unless, Dimitri, you would like to add anything else, anything more?
Nothing really to add. Again, a big thank you for giving us this opportunity, and the whole Demokritos team for engaging with us throughout the years and supporting us.
Thank you for the very interesting discussion. We have a bit of time for questions. There is already one of them in the chat. I assume that you are using some kind of indexing with pre-calculated results, probably in a memory database or by another mechanism to serve the results quickly. I assume you do not want to rely on inference on demand. If that's the case, do you pre-calculate everything? Do you monitor user behavior and thus optimize for what's more likely to be asked, etc.?
So it depends what we're talking about. On certain parts of the platform, indeed, we pre-calculate things so that they are very fast. And we do this pre-calculation in certain periods of time so that we make sure that all the data is refreshed. Other things that we can calculate fast on the fly, we do it on the fly. So it depends on the part of the platform.
Thank you. Next question. Do you use pharmacovigilance data like the first data for adverse effects in your risk prediction process?
So yeah, I can answer this one. So pharmacovigilance data actually comes from drugs and pipelines that have already been approved. So that comes much later down the process. We're looking at pipelines before they get approval.
I think, Gerry, if I can insist a bit here and try to give an interpretation, I think the comment is whether such data can be useful to train your models.
Yeah, but the pharmacovigilance data come for drugs that have been approved and already in the market, so they can provide, let's say, indication about safety and adverse events, but for drugs that are already out in the market.
True, but if you use this data have been in phase 3 at some point, right, or phase 2. So sorry, these drugs. So if you take this extra information beyond what the clinical trial has given you, then you have a better idea about the safety profile of the drug. Take it as labels. Take it as labeling data for your training.
Yeah, I mean, what we actually also do is that we take into account the approved drugs and the drugs that are under investigation, let's say, that are ongoing, and we do some kind of similarity indices. And that has a higher, let's say, information looking at the approved and how similar are they going to the approved than because since they're already approved and now they're in the market, that means they have passed the safety threshold. Obviously, every drug, especially when we talk about oncology, have some adverse events. The threshold that the regulator will apply is that if it's below the threat, you know, if it doesn't pass the safety threshold, then it will remain approved. So by looking at the approved drugs and the similarity of the current to the approved, we get much of the information.
Yeah, that makes sense. There are only very few drugs that would be retracted, if you want, through safety, because of safety issues, I guess. The prediction that you do, is it the prediction about the outcome of the trials? Is it always at phase 3, or do you try to predict earlier than that?
We try to predict throughout the clinical trial space. So from phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3, and we follow those pipelines as they move down the phases and down the stages, let's say, and as they publish more data. So we always try to capture what's the latest stage of its pipeline and get all the relevant data that we can about that pipeline and give the prediction at that moment in time. But we do it throughout the clinical trial development phase.
Do you have a confidence interval for your probabilities, and is that larger if you are in phase 1 than in phase 3?
I mean, definitely the more data we have and the further down the pipeline the programs are, the more robust, let's say, the probabilities and the results are. Definitely.
But do you provide this information to the user somehow, the robustness?
We don't provide. It's a big discussion about confidence interval regarding probabilities on binary outcomes. But we don't currently provide the confidence interval for the probability, right?
One more thing we do is that we provide another number, which is phase transition probability. So not the probability of going from phase 1 to FDA approval, but from phase 1 to phase 2, which is something that is much closer and much more, let's say, robust as a number for the user to understand what is, how good their trial at early stages.
Yeah, that's clear. I liked the fact that you provided some results about in a sort of prospective fashion. This is very interesting. There are a couple of comments that I have on that. One is, do you have the overall any overall figure about the accuracy of your predictions? If you take the 0.5 threshold, I guess, which you sort of implied in your results.
Oh yeah, and I think they allude to this at some point. We have, for most phases, for most indications we cover, TAs we cover, we have a specificity and sensitivity of more than 80%. When we started out on this journey, I never hoped we would get to such high specificity sensitivity. I wasn't expecting it because it's art and science at the same time. But we get a quite high accuracy in the predictions. And that applies also to phase 1 quite often, which again is a bit unexpected.
Yeah, that's very interesting if it applies so early. Another idea that came to my mind when I saw these results and I saw the 2 slides that you showed, shapely values after the prospective results, is that your prospective evaluation could actually be used to assess how good the explanations are. So if you give some reasons for why a particular trial might fail, you might then be able to verify or refute that assumption when the actual clinical trial fails or succeeds. Have you done an investigation like that?
So from what I understand, you mean like have a look at the prospective trials that end up failing and compare those to the ones that got approval, right?
No, that's not what I meant. You have a try, so you prospectively look and say that, in phase 3, I predicted that this trial will fail. And then it turns out after a few months that the trial has failed. If you look back at your shapely values before, you can compare them to the actual reasons why the clinical trial failed. And then you may get some assessment of how good your explanation model is. Not the classification model, but the actual explanation model.
It's a very good point. We have not done it yet. And actually, it's a great idea that we could and should be implementing.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity that you have, because assessing explanation is a very hard thing to do. And there's a lot of research, but no conclusive answers. And shapely values are under a lot of fire. So if you show that the shapely values that you have are verified somehow prospectively, I think that adds to your the value of your product.
Would it be possible to train your algorithm and give some insights related to drug repurposing as well, an approved drug to be used in treating another disease?
Yeah, we have quite a lot of data to actually, let's say, tackle the drug repurposing problem. However, and that's a great point, there are quite a few solutions already out there that address this.
It was, again, a great pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone in the audience.
Thank you very much.